In today's program, the Thai government is expected to review the list of countries eligible for the Test and Go entry scheme, while tourism operators have expressed their frustration and concern. Meanwhile, Thailand's sex workers mail in their high heels to Parliament House. Details on these stories and many more coming right up. You're watching Thailand News Today, bringing you the latest headlines in Thailand and beyond. And in our first story, the Thai government is expected to review the list of countries eligible for the Test and Go entry scheme as concerns over the Omicron variant mount. Supot Mala Niyom from the CCSA says COVID-19 screening will be intensified and the list of eligible countries will be revised. According to a report, the CCSA is expected to identify a number of high-risk countries and will meet on Friday to decide the fate of the Test and Go scheme. Supot Mala Niyom from the CCSA says the center is monitoring the spread of Omicron in other countries in addition to the UK. He says the situation is alarming and the government must take necessary precautions. Yesterday, the public health minister said that he would be proposing that the Test and Go scheme be ditched as cases of the Omicron variant spread rapidly across the world. Anutin Chanvirakul says his ministry would support the re-implementation of state quarantine or sandbox measures for all international arrivals, regardless of vaccination status. His comments came as Thailand confirmed its first case of local transmission of the highly contagious variant. The Department of Disease Control's Director of Epidemiology, Chakrat Piya Wong Anand, says the 49-year-old Thai woman caught COVID-19 from her husband, who is a Colombian pilot who arrived from Nigeria via the Sandbox program on November the 26th. Chakrat says he is in favor of increased travel restrictions for a temporary period to slow the spread. Meanwhile, Supakit Sirilak from the Department of Medical Sciences has confirmed that as of Monday, Thailand has confirmed 63 Omicron infections, adding that the detection rate has increased from less than 1% last week to 3%. He says around 25% of international arrivals who tested positive for COVID were found to be infected with Omicron. Thailand's tourism operators have expressed frustration and concern over the possibility that the Test and Go entry scheme could be scrapped. However, Yutasak Subason from the Tourism Authority of Thailand has rushed to reassure them, pointing out that nothing has been decided yet, saying that the CCSA plans to listen to all stakeholders carefully before nailing down a decision. Despite the TAT's assurances, tourism operators are nervous. Marisa Sukoson Nunpakdi from the Thai Hotels Association fears that a return to quarantine measures would be a big mistake. She points out that many hotel staff have only just returned to work and the move could see them unemployed once more. Marisa says the existing Test and Go scheme should continue, but with some enhanced screening measures. She suggests a PCR test taken within 24 to 48 hours of departure to Thailand, in addition to the requirement for a booster vaccine to be included as part of the vaccination certificate, and a health pass to be required in all public spaces. Phumkit Raktaingam from the Phuket Tourism Association shares her belief that the Test and Go should stay, but says that if it is scrapped, tourists should be allowed to visit under a sandbox scheme as opposed to mandatory quarantine. She adds that Phuket is confident about the safety of the entry process set for the Sandbox program in July. In the east of the country, Thanet Supon Saharangsi from the Chonburi Tourism Council is also worried about the potential reintroduction of mandatory quarantine. He adds that business and tourism operators in Pattaya are very concerned about sudden changes to entry requirements, particularly at this time of year. Forward bookings in Pattaya have already reached the 70% mark and several hotels reported being fully booked for the New Year period. More than 3,000 Myanmar refugees in Thailand's border province, Tak, are seeking shelter inside the kingdom after fleeing the ongoing violence between the junta and the Karen National Union. Now, the UN's refugee agency is calling on Thailand to give them urgent access to the refugees. Hundreds fled the Karen state to Thailand to escape the artillery shelling and small arms fire between the state military and the ethnic army. But that number shot up from 700 on Thursday to 3,900 by Monday, according to the UN's High Commissioner for Refugees. The UN's refugee agency issued a statement expressing concern for Myanmar refugees and offering assistance to Thai authorities to provide them with essential humanitarian aid. According to provincial authorities who provided aid, about 3,500 refugees remain in two places on the Thai side, as some have gradually returned after violence appeared to have halted yesterday. The Secretary General of the Karen Women's Organization, No Hye Paw, told AFP that most people are still terrified of what happened to their villages, as fighting is still going on in certain locations. A spokesperson from the Myanmar Military Information Team said discussions are underway with the KNU to calm the situation. However, according to state media, soldiers raided Karen territory and arrested many dissidents, including a former MP from Aung San Suu Kyi's deposed administration. Karen National Liberation Army is an ethnic armed group fiercely opposed to the junta that toppled the democratically elected government in February and has offered shelter to anti-coup dissidents. It is one of more than 20 ethnic armed groups occupying territory in Myanmar's border regions. With bars and nightclubs still ordered to remain closed, sex workers have been mailing boxes with pairs of high heels to the government each day to, quote, remind them of their responsibility for the people impacted by their policies. Each pair of heels contained a note calling for the government to compensate red light district workers who are out of work due to the pandemic. The government has continued to ignore their requests, and those in the red light industry plan to submit another letter asking for compensation and support. The Empower Foundation, a non-profit organization that supports sex workers in Thailand, is holding an event today at the Bangkok Arts and Culture Center to write messages to the government. They will submit another letter tomorrow. The coordinator of the Empower Foundation says the government's financial relief and support measures during the pandemic do not cover everyone. She added that some groups working in a nightlife business, like singers and musicians, were eligible for compensation and benefits, but people working in bars, massage parlors, and other nightlife venues were not included. Thailand's controversial health minister Anutin Charnvirakul says he is ready to lead the country and become the next prime minister. According to an ASEAN Now report, Anutin was addressing a gathering of his Phumjai Thai party in the northeastern city of Nakhon Ratchasima, also known as Korat. His comments have been picked up by the Thai media, with Sanuk.com posting a photo of him with a caption indicating that he is now a prime ministerial candidate. He has some support too, with Transport Minister Saksayam Shitchop saying he would back him. However, Anutin was careful to point out that he still fully supports the current prime minister and would only consider taking over when his boss is ready to step down. The COVID-19 pandemic has put Anutin in the spotlight, and not only with Thai citizens. He came to the attention of foreign residents and some tourists during the early days of the pandemic when he berated, quote, dirty Farangs for not accepting the face masks he was handing out as part of a PR stunt at a Bangkok station. He then went as far as to suggest that foreigners should be kicked out of the country. Rightly or wrongly, many blame his comments for a disturbing wave of xenophobia that emerged shortly after. Last week, Anutin hit the headlines again when he declared that the pandemic was no match for Thailand and the healthcare workers he's in charge of. Addressing an event in the northeastern province of Loi, he described COVID as, quote, inferior compared to his ministry. The ASEAN Now report points out that he's also survived several politically damaging incidents when he was caught not wearing a face mask. And that wraps up the show for today. Our show will be back tomorrow. Meanwhile, you're now up to date on the Thaiger.